I mentioned earlier that the Romantic era had an impact not just on literature but also music and art, so a little bit about how it affected music. Beethoven represents the start of the Romantic era in music. He's generally known as a classical composer, but some of his work does mimic what you can find in the Romantic era. Peter Tchaikovsky wrote the ballets for Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty, and they are both still played today. Melodramatic plots means very dramatic, overly dramatic, and supernatural terror became popular with operatic performances, so opera performances were also affected. Folk music and its characteristics became popular again. I mentioned earlier that pastoral qualities tended to emerge as a result of the Romantic era in literature. Well, they were also mimicked in music. Pastoral means not urban, it means rural, or it has to do with the country and the countryside. And so what kind of music are you most likely to find in this rural landscape? Folk music, earthy music. So those characteristics became popular again. I'm going to play for you some of the ballet from Swan Lake. This is the suite from Swan Lake. It's actually very popular, so you might recognize it. So it's easy to see how the music was also very melodramatic and emotional, so it reflected the time period. For those of you wondering where Cyrano de Bergerac fits into all of this, Cyrano de Bergerac was a result of the Romantic era. It was a part of it. It contains people and characters like a swashbuckling hero. It also has a damsel in distress and a mustache-twirling villain, all very typical archetypes that we will see in a romantic piece of literature. Cyrano was also written in something called Alexandrine Verse. Remember that Cyrano was translated from French. It's a line of poetic meter comprised of 12 syllables. Alexandrine is popular among German literature of the Baroque period and French literature of the early modern and modern periods. We don't see Alexandrine verse in the English language too much. What we tend to see is something called iambic pentameter, which you should be more familiar with. That's 5 lines of 5 rhyming words, and that's what Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe used. It is thought, though, that Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe may have used Alexandrine before they supplemented it with iambic pentameter. Alexandrine verse, however, is iambic hexameter, so hex meaning 6. Okay, so a verse of 6 feet, which stresses the second beat or syllable. In meter, a caesura is a complete pause in a line of poetry or in a musical composition, so it's a break. In syllabic verse, such as that used in French literature, Alexandrine is a line of 12 syllables. Most commonly, the line is divided into 2 equal parts, so it's divided between the 6th and the 7th syllables. Another way that you might see it is a line divided into 3 4-syllable sections by 2 caesuras, but you still have 12 syllables. So in summary, a rhyming couplet of 12 syllables per line. So rhyming couplets of 12 syllables per line. An example of something written in Alexandrine verse would be from Shelley's To a Skylark. Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know. Such harmonious madness from my lips would flow. The world would listen then as I am listening now. It's important to note that Cyrano de Bergerac isn't completely written in Alexandrine. It's just the closest that we can identify. So if you had to name what poetic skill is being used, it would be Alexandrine verse.